Hi, my name's Sue Wallace, and Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without my plum pudding.
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the podcast that explores the universe of Doctor Who and audio media. My name's Dwayne.
And my name is Philip. G'day audiophiles, g'day Dwayne. How are you going?
I'm very well, and joining us today from Flight Through Entirety is Todd. G'day Todd.
Hello. Good to see
Todd,
you.
Great to have you.
It's lovely to be here, guys.
Thanks very much for joining us. What are you guys up to over there at FTE at the moment?
Well, we're on a little hiatus at the moment. We just finished Series 6 of New Who, and we're about to start Series 7 the rest of this year. And we've got a couple more episodes of Jodie into Terror to go, obviously, with the final 2 episodes of Jodie coming up. And I think a number of the guys are recording Maximum Power at the moment, Series B of the Blake 7 podcast. So that's where we're at.
I'm curious, Todd, now you're getting closer to today's modern day. Are you finding FTEs they're easier to do or they're harder to do? Because you had so much to talk about with the classic series and you'd all pondered it and seen it so many times. How are you finding the classic series talking about it compared to the modern?
I think you know the classic a lot more and you have a lot of stories to relate from your childhood and things like that. I think that makes, when you talk about the classic shows, it's just etched in your brain. I think with New Who, obviously, I've not watched, and like I saw, I've not watched it as much, certain episodes, but it's just different. I mean, I can't say it's any worse or better. It's just a different sort of vibe. And plus, I'm not on every episode as well, so but I am watching them all, and then I do get to do the retrospectives, which I do like. So it's challenging because I think I have very, how should I put it, classic views about how Doctor Who should be, and sometimes that's very different to the rest of the team. So I'm always quite challenged by points of view at times, or my eyes are opened. I mean, if you listen regularly, you'll often hear me say, oh, yes, I've changed my opinion on things. And that's quite true because, as you both know me from being in the Doctor Who Club here in Australia for many years, that, for me, when I have new Doctor Who, sometimes it does take a while to sort of reflect and warm to it. Often I'm, not often, but regularly enough, I'll sort of go, oh, I don't like that, but then I'll come back to it and revise it. So I'm enjoying watching all the new series and seeing the positives in it and some of the negatives. But generally, I'm liking it more really as I go along.
Because I'm getting the impression that you see new things you like along the way. Of the whole journey from Unearthly Child to now, what's the show you've changed your opinion of the most since doing the podcast?
The show or the series? I mean,
or either. What struck you? I mean, you've done this mammoth task. I don't know how many years Flight Through Entirety has been going for now. It's a long time. It must be coming up to almost 10 years. I don't know.
I don't know if we're that long into it, but it certainly is 5 years or so. What's changed the most? I'd have to say my opinion of Peter Davison changed dramatically, rewatching things. I never liked Peter or the Fifth Doctor as a child, but I really appreciate what he brought to the role, even if I'm not a big fan of Series 19 or 20, but I think he's phenomenal in 21. I think that season, I think, is amazing. But I think all the way through he is doing so much, and that's something from Classic Who that's certainly been a big takeaway. And I guess my revision of John Pertwee, who in the 90s, if you remember, fandom sort of was a bit down on that era. And now I think he's actually close to, well, if not, I prefer him to Tom Baker, which, I would never have said that at one point. I really liked that era. And of the new Who stuff, I think I appreciate Russell's work a lot more now. Even though I'm not a massive fan of David Tennant, that's the other thing. In the moment, David Tennant, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And it's only I tire a bit of his stuff towards the end. But also the Cybermen, I think, too. I certainly wrote a lot of those stories off that Russell did, and I certainly liked them a lot more this time through, if I have to say. And of course, currently, if you're listening to the current series of FTE, you'll know that my opinion of Karen Gillan has certainly changed, or Amy, who I never really warmed to first time through, but I really like her a lot more now. So there you go. That's some of the things I've discovered along the way.
Yeah, some great reflections. And isn't the great thing about Doctor Who is as you keep going back, you find new things, you see new things, get excited by new things. Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Todd.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm really looking forward to when we get to Capaldi, who is my favourite new series Doctor, and seeing how that stacks up. So it'll be interesting.
Excellent. Of course, we're here today to talk about an era where there was no new Doctor Who on television. It was 20 years ago when the Chimes of Midnight was released in February 2002, and we're going to talk about that because we were all quite heavily involved in fandom at the time. So I'm curious to get your recollections of what things were like with these new 8th Doctor episodes coming on. But before we do that, Todd, do you know what usually happens before we get into the meat of our episodes?
No, Dwayne. Please explain.
I think you do. I think you should have your TARDIS stress ball on standby because I see a rabbit hole. Let's go. All right, guys, because I've got 3 of us here, I thought I'd try something a little different today. I'm going to do, and this will ease your nerves, Todd, greatly. I'm going to do a little quiz. I'm going to do a quiz on the 8th Doctor and Charley. Go with me, Todd. Go with me. So I've got 2 sets of questions. I've got set A and set B. And Todd, as you're the guest, I'm going to let you pick which set of questions you would like to go with.
I'll go with set B.
Okay, let's go. We'll start off. And there's no prizes for this except the glory of the win. That's all it is. So, Todd, question 1. In which Big Finish story did India Fisher first appear as Charley Pollard?
Storm Warning?
Correct.
Indeed.
Very well done. And guys, if I see your eyes looking away from the screen, you are disqualified immediately.
No quick Googling allowed, huh?
Philip, question 1. India Fisher first appeared for Big Finish in Winter for the Adept, written by Andrew Cartmel. Who was the executive producer credited for this story?
That would have been Gary Russell.
Well, it looks like Todd has hit the lead because the executive producer was Jacqueline Rayner. There you go.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I thought she was just for the BBC.
Executive producer, that's her credit on. You can argue all you like, but that's what the answer is, Philip. All right, Todd, question 2.
I think I see a pattern emerging, Todd. Can I just say we'll see?
Well, we've only had one question. What pattern could there possibly be? Todd, question 2. In Minuet in Hell, the 8th Doctor meets which beloved head of unit?
Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart.
That is absolutely correct. I don't know how you're doing this, Todd. It's incredible. Philip, question 2. In the Mark Gatiss story Invaders from Mars, who plays Don Chaney? Come on, Philip, you've only just listened to these not long ago.
Mark Gatiss?
Oh, well, he wrote it.
Yeah, I was hopeful he was acting in it too.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Incorrect. It was Simon Pegg.
Oh, okay. Yep, okay.
You're letting the team down here.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing. Okay, Todd. Question 3. There's only 5 questions, by the way. Which well-known classic Doctor Who actor who has appeared in The Ark, The Mind of Evil, Pyramids of Mars, The Invisible Enemy, Castrovalva, and Remembrance of the Daleks has a guest starring role in the 8th Doctor and Charley adventure, The Stones of Venice?
Michael Sheard.
You've done it again. I can't believe it.
Well done, Todd.
This is incredible.
I'm astounded.
Mate, you are putting us to shame. I think you should become a permanent member of the Sirens of Audio, Todd. Okay, Philip, question 3 for you. Nicholas Briggs' Patient Zero, you know that story, don't you?
Yes.
Was which number in the monthly range catalogue? Come on, Philip. I know you know this one.
100 and...
Oh, you've almost got it.
4? 2.
102, is that your final answer?
Yes.
You've said 100, you said 2, you said 4, but their answer is actually 124, so you were extremely close, but no cigar. Okay. Philip, what is going on?
Yeah, I'm slack.
I'm starting to feel quite a lot of shame here. Todd, question 4. Which famous actor from Blake 7, known in the show for his thieving and lock-picking abilities, not to mention having appeared in every episode of the series, also has a guest starring role in the Divergent Universe story, The Twilight Kingdom? Oh, I can see the cogs turning.
I know it's Villa, but I can't remember his actual the actor's name. When you say it, I'll know it. But
you will. Okay.
I can say that one.
You're passing. All right. Give him a hand there, Philip.
Michael Keating.
You got it right. Absolutely right, Philip. But unfortunately, that wasn't your question.
Yeah.
Okay. Question 4, Philip. What is the last monthly range story to feature Charley with the 8th Doctor and the first to feature her with the 6th Doctor? So we want both stories. You can get yourself half a point with one of them.
Yeah. Is Girl in the title for the last one with Paul McGann?
Correct.
The Girl Who Never Was?
Correct. That is half a point. Well done.
And the Colin Baker one. That's the police officer story, isn't it? No, I can't do that one.
Okay, but I'm very, very pleased that you were able to manage half a point there, Philip. The first story was called The Condemned.
Ah, that's it. It's got the police officer.
And the police officer is played by the actress who plays Nurse Haim, the cat
that's right.
nurse.
She comes back in later.
I can't remember the actress's name off the top of my head, although I should. Todd, this is your final question for a potential 4 out of 5. So 80%, that's a pass. Well and truly a pass. What is the full name of the most recent box set to feature the 8th Doctor and Charley?
Charlotte Pollard. Is it The Further Adventuress? Oh my goodness. I looked at this afternoon. I'm going to be very upset now.
Well, I can tell you, Todd, that you are absolutely correct. I did say the full title, which is Doctor Who, the Charlotte Pollard, the Further Adventuress, but I'll give it to you anyway. So there you go. There's a 4 out of 5. And Philip, we'll see if you can get a 1.5 out of 5 on this question. Question 5. Who directed the Charley Companion Chronicle, Solitaire, written by one of our favourites, John Dorney?
Well, I want to say Lisa Bowerman.
Do you want to say Lisa Bowerman?
Well, Lisa Bowerman does most Companion Chronicles, but my betting will be it's not going to be her if you've asked me that question, because you want me to get it wrong.
I don't know what you mean, Philip.
So So I'm suddenly thinking it wasn't Lisa Bowerman, it'd be someone else, like Ken Bentley.
Was Ken Bentley around at that time?
Maybe not. Okay, well, I'll say Lisa Bowerman just so I could be wrong. Who was it?
Incorrect. It was in fact Nicholas Briggs.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
There you
Thanks,
go.
Ray.
So,
What a great quiz.
well, it was a fantastic quiz for Todd. So congratulations, Todd. I'm extremely excited that you're able to take out the very first Sirens of Audio quiz. So thank you.
Thank you. I thought it was just tremendous. And but it proves why I'm not on the Blake 7 podcast if I can't remember Michael Keating's name.
Yeah, shame on you for that, by the way. I
Just
thought you'd know that for sure.
Maybe the Sunmakers would have brought it to you.
No. I don't like the Sunmakers, so no.
So that was the quiz. We are going to talk about the Chimes of Midnight first of all. But to do that, I'll throw in a trailer and we'll be back in just a second.
Well, Charlie, where are we?
I don't know, Doctor. It's too dark. You were supposed to be getting me to Singapore, 1930, remember?
An Edwardian Christmas. How lovely.
I never much liked plum pudding. Cook always used to make far too much of it, and we were still picking our way through it by New Year.
Oh, I love a bit of plum pudding, no?
Charlie, there'll be a death here soon.
Edith, what are you saying? Whose death?
I can make you warmer than that fire ever could.
Can't you just leave it, I said?
I only wanted a kiss.
Always been your favourite, ever since you were a little girl.
It certainly has. You'll make me plum pudding forever, won't you? Even when I'm grown up?
There'll be another murder soon, and everyone will forget me. Don't you forget me, Charlie.
Oh,
Mr. Shaughnessy, you're pointing a gun at us.
Yes, sir.
That's not a very nice way for a well-bred butler to behave, is it?
You are not to go upstairs. It is not our place. We only go upstairs when we are summoned.
please, don't leave me here on my own.
Doctor? Doctor, where are you?
Of course, it's not proof. I mean, I suppose I could be lying when I said I didn't kill her.
Oh, yes. As of course could I.
Stands to reason. Once you've committed murder, a bit of fibbing is hardly going to bother your conscience, is it?
It's mocking us. Whatever this force is, it's mocking us.
2002. We were all reasonably involved in fandom back then. What was the state of fandom back then before the TV series came back? Do you remember, Todd?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been involved with organising Doctor Who conventions, as you know, here in Australia for the previous 7 or 8 years, and I've been involved with the Doctor Who Club. And throughout the 90s into the early 2000s, like, the numbers began to dwindle, in the club. You could see, from the mid-90s, like halving of the numbers of people that was sort of involved coming to events and that sort of thing. I mean, even with the audios, there was interest there. I certainly felt that there was a group of people willing to support those, certainly after the book sort of series sort of also sort of, I think, died down. So it was just very different to what it is now. I mean, Doctor Who was just, well, as you know, Dwayne, like it was a niche thing that was slowly disappearing, into the memories of people our age who grew up with it, on the ABC. I mean, would that be a fair assessment, Philip?
Well, I mean, you say that, but you were running conventions that were getting hundreds of people along, attracting great guests, and yet nothing like that's been run. And that's not because of COVID. Australia's not successfully run anything to that scale for a long, long time now.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, Dwayne, we were still getting hundreds of people, but I mean, I look at the difference between the first convention I was involved with, which was in 1993 with Mary Tam, and we got, over 350 people to that convention, and with Elizabeth Sladen at the end of 96, I mean, we still got, 250 plus, but by, the numbers were certainly around, 200 or so, like in that early 2000s. Like there was just little dips. It was just beginning. People were beginning to, I just feel, drift away. We were certainly getting a lot of people. That's for certain. But I guess when you look at it from a convention perspective, you could see, the change in numbers, and we certainly had to work a lot harder to get people along. But still, this is all very much pre-social media, pre sort of all these big conventions now, that are such a military operation where people, it's autograph, it's photograph, that's all that they want. And certainly at that time, it was more about, coming along and meeting the people and hearing the stories, which now, of course, you can get on the DVD extras, etc., and that sort of thing. The state of fandom, like the fans were there, but there wasn't really anybody new to renew, if I can say that. When people sort of left or drifted away, there weren't new people coming in.
It was interesting because I'd been very big into Doctor Who when I was younger, and had been involved with the Doctor Who Club a bit sort of in my high school years, and I'd sort of faded away for a while. It was actually the late 90s when I started getting back excited again. So I sort of came back as everyone else was leaving. So the next 10 or so years were for me actually quite an influential time and a positive time in terms of getting into fandom, meeting people, and having the sort of discussions I just love to have. I guess this is what podcasts do now, isn't it? We've taken the podcast now is the discussion that we used to have around the dining table after a convention or around the bar. So it's sort of the conversation has moved locations, but yeah, it was certainly a different time. But the people who were enthusiastic and keen and all sorts. I mean, that was part of the joy of the club, wasn't it? That you're never quite sure what you're going to get out of the people who turn up, and it's the range of beliefs, understandings, and careers and everything. It was just this huge mix of people, but all with a common love. I do think the Big Finish stories made an impact, and certainly for the club in terms of selling them. It was a very big thing when they first came out. Suddenly they had something which was real Doctor Who, which I don't think the books ever quite. I know people love the books, and there's lots of people who adore the books and read them all and bought them all. But I think the audio has brought something new because it was actually the actors performing. And I think getting the actors back was impressive. And then when Paul McGann came back, then you actually had new seasons. And particularly the first 3 or 4 seasons of McGann felt like real Doctor Who seasons because they came out every month, one after the other. They weren't split up. And for me, that was really new Doctor Who coming out. What did you think, Dwayne?
Just in terms of the difference between fan gatherings back then and now podcasts, I think podcasts and internet are sort of been a bit more divisive. So if people sort of are attracted to certain personalities on podcasts, they'll go over there at that group and they'll just stick with that group or the other. Whereas with the old fan gatherings, that was people of all different types all together. We're all mixing together, and it's a bit of a shame that we don't have that so much anymore. That's one thing that I miss. We could sit on the taverns in Sydney, we'd have 30 of us sitting in a long table of every kind of background and belief and persuasion, all sitting around talking about what we loved, and we just don't get that anymore.
I totally agree with you, totally 100%. I think, leading up to the change of the century, the influence of the internet hadn't really hit. And, the newsletter was still there, those physical day events and those gatherings that you talked about. It was very different. I mean, obviously, most of my experiences are through the 1990s, and so many friends I made in the early 90s, and they're still friends today, and into the early 2000s. I guess part of my thing is that towards the end of that time, I guess I was getting a bit tired, with running things. I'd been president of the Doctor Who Club. I'd been doing the convention. So perhaps not in 2002. We'd come off 2 really great, I think, conventions with Sylvester McCoy and Annika Wills Sylvester McCoy and Nicola Bryant, and then Colin Baker and Annika Wills and Katie. And so in those sort of terms, keeping fandom alive and keeping, events which we were amateurs. Like, we weren't incorporated, we weren't these big organizations, we were doing it on a minuscule budget, I do think there was a heart there that I look, today I got a message from somebody who sent me a picture from one of the conventions where I had organised a birthday cake because it was her birthday during one of the night events. And then she sent me a picture of me with a Dalek wearing a Colin Baker costume, which I hadn't seen in 25 years. It's those things that I think were quite amazing about fandom at that time. And I think looking back on it, it was just a special time because it was sort of a smaller group. It was us, whereas now New Who is fantastic. It's opened up so many opportunities, but at the same time, fandom is a very different place.
Were you following the audios from the start, Todd?
Definitely, I was very excited by them, and like Philip, I actually preferred them to the novels, which I had lost interest in. And hearing the previous Doctors back was tremendous, and the quality of Big Finish. You could see them gaining their footing in the first 5 or 10. I thought the Colin Baker ones were just incredible right from the get-go. And yes, so I was very much a collector, Dwayne. I like all my I like all my videos, then I like all my DVDs. Now I like all my my Blu-rays, and I loved collecting the CDs for Big Finish, which now everything's downloadable. I like having those tangible things, the little booklets with all the cast listings and all that sort of thing. So so I was very much into it, and obviously got to know Jason Haig-Ellery and Gary Russell, and supported them as much as we could in the club to get that product out to fans here.
I was a bit slow coming on board with the audios, and it wasn't until I became more involved with the club and someone actually loaned me some CDs. I was very interested in the 8th Doctor audios, and it was actually the Chimes of Midnight was the very first one that I heard. Someone loaned it to me, and from that moment, I was hooked. So it's a very special story for me, which I've talked about on the podcast before even Philip came along. So it's had quite an incredible impact. That was new Doctor Who in a series type format as well. So this was the current Doctor, hadn't regenerated yet, and it was a very exciting thing to get the 8th Doctor back like this. So do you recall the buzz around that, Philip, at the time?
Well, I do. It's interesting that part of the second. Paul McCann came back with a bang with the first 4 stories, and Big Finish did it really well in terms of bringing back Nicholas Briggs was a great move. They introduced the first 4. Simon were there. It was a great first 4, but the second series really when it took off. And it's the first time, of course, Doctor Who's actually, I guess, unless you count the Tahiti time, which is as a arc, which I guess you maybe can. This was the first time we actually had a running arc, which wasn't just at the end you touch something and it turns to crystal. Embedded throughout the entire series was the idea of time being distorted. And so they picked up on what happened in the first season with the Doctor rescuing Charlie when he shouldn't have done and changing time. And every episode in this series, some more so, some less so, was dealing with the effect of what the Doctor had done. And so for the first real time in Doctor Who, you had this arc running through the story, which was slowly building. There's only a couple of touches in the first Mark Gatiss one. I think Charlie doesn't know who Shakespeare is, and there's a couple of strange things like that. But they don't draw attention to it at all. But when you hit this story, suddenly you start to realize time's out of joint and it's going to progress. And so I think just the buzz of 6 stories all interlinked in some ways, you can just listen to any story by themselves and enjoy it. But for the person who's actually listening on, you've got more happening. And I think by this stage, people have just realized Paul McGann was amazing. Just like when Colin Baker came back in the audios, Big Finish did him the greatest service in terms of giving him the shows that let his Doctor be brilliant. And I think Colin Baker has had far better stories on audio than he got to do on TV, which is unfortunate because he's an amazing actor and he's really been allowed to do that. Suddenly we saw Paul McGann as a real Doctor. And so the first 4 sort of kicked it off, and I think this just continues. And Chimes of Midnight, it's still, you ask any Big Finish person, anyone who's listened to Big Finish audios, the best one, it is nearly always still the Chimes of Midnight #1 for nearly everyone. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why, I'm sure, soon.
Well, that's a good point, actually. It's still my number one, probably because it's my sentimental favourite, was my first experience. But has the Chimes of Midnight, if you listen to it again for this podcast, has it stood the test of time, Todd?
I think so. I probably wasn't as enamoured with the first run of the Eighth Doctor Charley ones as what Philip was. It was great to have the Eighth Doctor back. Like many things, it takes me a little while to warm. And I think this was the first one that I really fell in love with of his audios. But listening to this this week, just India Fisher, I just think is the bee's knees. To me, companions make or break a Doctor in so many ways. And I loved Charley in the run of the first 4 stories. And then hearing this again this week, it reminded me of just how good she was and how much I wanted her to be the Doctor Who companion. I sort of have these dreams of maybe they should turn this into a cartoon and use the audio, so we have a cartoon series. I still dream of that whenever I listen to the audios. It's always like, I'd love to see it done in an animation form with the audio track. I mean, obviously it's not designed that way, but so for me, the Chimes of Midnight is of the Eighth Doctor's initial 2 runs. This is the one that stood out at the time, and I adored listening to it again this week.
Last time I listened to it, I listened to a whole Charley run a couple of years ago. But this time, once again, I just adored it. I was transporting one of my children to ballet, and she was just laughing at bits. So she was in the car while the bit of a trigger warning. Suicide's a big topic in this, so just a trigger warning there in case that's important to you. In it, there's this scene where the chauffeur is killed by being run over by his car, even though he's inside. And the Doctor's describing the fact that he's been hit by a car several times, and all this damage being done. And Shaughnessy says, "Suicide, of course." And then Paul McGann says, "Yes, of course it was suicide," and it's playing that whole scene up. And my daughter, who's 14, was cracking up beside me because the thing was just so funny in terms of the way it was being portrayed and that. And so it's a dark and black story, which Robert Shearman often writes, but it is so funny in bits in terms of its awful humour, black humour. And as I said, to listen to my daughter laughing at large chunks of this story as we're going along and thinking, well, it's still capturing her, and she's never heard it before, and that. So I think it still holds up, but it is a different style. And I think, if we talk, we're going to talk briefly, I assume, at the end about the new box that just came out. I think the first story in that box that catches the same style, but then you start to see there is a different feel with audience today. And I guess things have to change, and our times do change, but it does almost. I don't know, it's an innocent age, maybe it's nostalgia. There is a feel to it, which is a bit less modern, even though a lot of the topics or themes have changed at all. What do you think? Does it still hold up, Dwayne?
Oh, absolutely, more than ever. It reminds me how much I miss the half-hour episode format. It's very interesting the way Rob Shearman's broken this down. They're very distinct episodes. Every single episode has a different kind of setting to it. Like the first episode is the Doctor and Charley sort of exploring the place and not being seen by everybody.
Parallel worlds, yep.
The second episode, they suddenly appear and then introduce themselves as from Scotland Yard. Then the third episode, they've got the members of the household staff turning on them. And then the fourth episode, you've got them off in the TARDIS somewhere else, but the house is with them. So it's very interesting the way it's been broken down. And I never refer to Rob Shearman as, I always laugh at his dialogue, but I never refer to it as comedy. I refer to it more as absurd, because even though it makes you laugh, he throws things in there that actually make you gasp with shock as well at times. And that's what I love about Rob Shearman's writing. He's pretty unique in the whole of Doctor Who. I don't think anybody else writes like him.
No. What's amazing, he's only written 5 full-length stories for Big Finish. Like, I sort of went back just to have a look at what he'd done. He'd only written The Holy Terror before this, which is equally black and bleak and also deals with a lot of similar themes, which, of course, all good playwrights keep exploring similar themes over and again. And so it's not unusual to see themes for Rob Shearman work throughout the 5 stories, which is, as I said, Rob Shearman is actually a playwright. That is really what he is. But really, that's considering how much, when you think of Big Finish, you often think of Rob Shearman, and you look at Big Finish output, it's tiny when you think about it.
Extremely.
But the impact he has made with those stories, and the fact that any of those are worth going to any time, and this, even the Unbound Derek Jacobi one is just astounding. Yeah, so I think the Chimes of Midnight, he's black, he's bleak, but he just explores the same themes.
It's interesting what you said about the 30-minute format and the feel of this to the more modern audios, because obviously this is pre-New Who and that take on things. So here you've got classic Who very much in terms of the structure, and I think that's interesting to listen to things like that. Like when I compare it to the ones in the actual box set, the Further Adventuress, I definitely can see the difference in the styles there. But I think, Philip, you're quite right that The Mummy Speaks is much more in this sort of traditional vein, and the others move away from that with like pre-credits sequences and just the style of the storytelling.
So, Rob Shearman, it was actually this story that Todd had prompted me to talk to you about organising something in Sydney and getting India Fisher and Rob Shearman out for a Whovention. Unfortunately, I had to drop out, but what was Rob like to you?
He was so generous and warm and funny and just a true gentleman. Like, that's all I can say. Giving of his time. Philip, you were there. Oh, he was such a fan. He just loved the show. And so he just loved being at the convention because he was a fan. And so I think often I think I interviewed him on stage once. And part of his shock was the fact of being on stage, being interviewed when he felt like he was, want to be in the audience and watching people come out. And he just had the best time because he loves the show. Todd ran there's a brilliant trivia quiz around on the Saturday night, of which I did considerably better, can I just say, answering questions than the questions I was given today. But I was actually on the same table as Rob. There was a few of us that we, just an absolute powerhouse. But there was hardly a question Rob didn't know. Like, he was astounding with his knowledge and just his passion. So great guy to be around. Lots of fun. And so humble, like, too, just not saying, he had talent, but he wouldn't see that. He'd say, no, I write, but I'm not at that level. But he actually was. He was a lovely, lovely guy.
He's at a different level altogether, if you ask me.
Yeah. and we mentioned structure, and you look at all his stories for Big Finish, and the structure is astounding. And I still think if in the New Who, if you want an episode that actually demonstrates Doctor Who structure perfectly, I think it's Rob Shearman's Dalek. I think the entire way that is set up and established and the way it's paced, I think he nailed perfectly exactly how the pacing should work. He was very blessed to be given Dalek by Russell T Davies, and I know it was an absolute murder to write, and the number of redrafts he had to do, and don't know how much that destroyed him long term, but it is still an episode you can go back to any time, and it is hard to find any fault with the storyline, with the dialogue, with the pacing. It is an astounding piece of work.
Absolutely. Now, Chimes of Midnight, I recall back in the day, it was referred to as, well, I think the brief Gary Russell gave to Rob was to write something that was like a cross between Upstairs, Downstairs and Sapphire and Steel. Now, Philip, I know your feelings on Sapphire and Steel, but Todd, what do you feel about the Sapphire and Steel? Are you a fan, and did you find those elements in Chimes?
Well, I can't actually answer that question because I've never actually seen it. So
Philip would say that's a good thing.
But I can say
No,
this.
I wouldn't go that far. I am glad I've seen the episodes I have. I just don't choose to see any more.
I'll just say this. I was listening to it and I just thought, this is like Downton Abbey on crack, really, as it goes along. And I know that you're saying upstairs, downstairs, but it is incredible how those elements of British society, like, have not been used a lot in Doctor Who, like up to this point. Like, it's obviously here. But I mean, if you think about classic Doctor Who, you can think of like maybe Ghostlight, Black Orchid, Evil of the Daleks, there's very few upstairs, downstairs sort of, I think, throughout Doctor Who's, which is why I think it works so well here. And and I just kept thinking Downton Abbey on crack. This is Downton Abbey before Downton Abbey, with the different characters. And you can follow it. And it's got all those elements, like, I know what Sapphire and Steel is, but it has got elements in there. If I just diverge, like, is it Scherzo or Scherzo, or however, that is one of my, I loathe that. I loathe it.
Really?
It is probably one of my least favorite audios, because it's so confusing to me and I just do not like it. Whereas this is the polar opposite. So he's got one of the best in the range, and I consider one of the not so best in the range. But,
okay.
But if you've listened to FTE podcasts, my problems with anything to do with timey-wimey stuff, like, that does my head in. But here it works, so it does work so well. And I just think having the whole house come alive and the house is controlling things is again a great twist.
Well, speaking of timey-wimey, I'm struggling more and more as I get older dealing with timey-wimey stuff. And it's actually Jubilee, another Rob Shearman script that I struggle with myself, particularly the second half when paradoxes are going all over the place. I know it makes sense, but by the end of listening to Jubilee, I'm still a little bit confused. Whereas you're right, Todd, this doesn't leave you confused at all. It ties up everything beautifully. And if this is Downton Abbey on crack, well, it's absolutely Sapphire and Steel on speed, because Sapphire and Steel does move very, very slowly. It does have a lot of elements like this, but this goes a heck of a lot faster. So this is actually the story that got me interested in Sapphire and Steel. So I actually had never seen it before. I don't even know if it was ever shown in Australia, but I went and sought it out and watched it all based on this. So I think he captured those elements very well from both of those stories, and he gave what Gary Russell delivered. Some of the other actors, Philip, do you want to talk about some of those? They're a bit of an ensemble cast that would turn up throughout the season in different stories.
Yeah, it certainly is an ensemble cast, which is part of its power. But it's also a pretty amazing cast, some of them who are in it. I guess two of them actually named after Upstairs, Downstairs people. And I think it's part of its power. And so Shaughnessy was the script editor of Upstairs, Downstairs, and that's how they named him. And Mrs. Baddeley, that was the actress's name who played the cook in Upstairs, Downstairs. So there's a little nod towards them. Lennox Greaves, who plays Shaughnessy, he would reappear a couple of times later in the season, because they sort of used an ensemble cast that reappeared. I think part of that was the fact that when they did the first 4 episodes, so when Paul agreed to do them, they sort of moved like lightning to get him 4 scripts. And 2 of them, I think they'd sort of prepared for Tom, but he didn't want to do them. And 2, I think then one was a audiovisual, another one was just written fast. And then when Paul did the first 4 scripts, he loved it. So they thought they may only get 4 scripts out of him, 4 stories, but he enjoyed himself so much. He said, they sort of said, do you want to do more? I said, yes, let's do them. And they were back within 3 months to do the next 6 stories. So it was this huge, rapid turnaround that they had to do, because they thought, well, we may just only get 6 more out of him, so we'll just get him out. Because at that stage, they weren't sure he would keep coming back. And so these 6 were sort of, once again, written really fast. I know Robert Shearman had a very short turnaround to write them. But also they were filming them at that stage in Bristol, which is where Paul McGann lives. So rather than bringing him down to London to record where they usually record Big Finish, everyone moved up there to make life as easy as possible for Paul, once again, to keep him on side. Now they just make him come to London. But back then, and so because they were moving all the cast people up there, they worked out that having a ensemble cast was going to work better. And so Robert Curbishley, Lennox Greaves, and Sue Wallace were part of the ensemble cast. And so they were sort of chosen, I think, by Gary, because Gary directed most of them. This one actually isn't directed by Gary, which is unusual. The story goes that Gary and Nick Briggs and the actual director, which is Barnaby Edwards, were actually just reading it. And they actually, when they were reading it out loud to each other just to do the timing and make sure it was working, they knew this was gold. So, which is, Robert Shearman didn't think it was any good. He thought he'd rushed it. He didn't think it was of high quality. He hated it when he handed it into them. But they read and knew it was gold. And Gary sort of realized he shouldn't direct all of them. And so handed to Barnaby, which was very gracious of him, knowing that this was going to be a good one. But it was Gary who cast the ensemble cast. Barnaby then did Mary and Edith. So they were the only 2 that he got to cast. But in the end, he just adored the fact that the cast. Sue Wallace, who played Mrs. Badley. So both Lennox Greaves and Sue Wallace both have very long and stellar careers. And I think Lewis Rofe, who plays Edith, just did a really stellar job too in terms of she doesn't seem like she's going to be a major part because she gets murdered at the start of part 2. But when she comes back in part 4, the amount of emotion and story she has to convey is both a young scullery maid who is nobody's no one, and then also an older woman is pretty powerful. So yeah, it's a stellar cast, very small cast, ensemble cast. They just keep going round and round in time and in circles, but they keep bringing slightly new things to their roles, but with the same catchphrases. It just becomes really insightful and powerful.
I'm going to jump in there and interrupt our chat with Todd. We'll come back to that later. But after recording this with Todd, Philip and I had the opportunity to speak with 3 of the cast members from the Chimes of Midnight: Lennox Greaves, Sue Wallace, and Robert Curbishley. So I'm going to bring that interview to you right now. Hope you enjoy it.
So 20 years ago this month, Big Finish's most well-known and probably most popular show of all time, The Chimes of Midnight, is celebrating its lovely anniversary. And tonight we have three of the stars from that program with us. So please welcome Robert Curbishley, Sue Wallace, and Lennox Greaves. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
You're very welcome.
That's well, nice to be here.
Excellent. Robert, let's just start with you. Just tell us a bit about where you are at the moment in the world.
I'm in my spare bedroom, sat on my spare bed, and I'm in Watford, which is where I live now and have done for sort of 10 years, yes.
Have you been thrown out of the main bedroom for a reason and you have to go to the spare bedroom?
Oh God, is it that obvious? It must be the hair that does it. No, it's just it's this classic where to find the best signal in the house nonsense. And as fast as Virgin is, their Wi-Fi is not the best. So if we want sort of peace and quiet and a consistent signal, this is the best place.
We all play the hunt the signal space wherever we go. That's great. And Sue and Lennox, where are you calling from?
We're in our middle bedroom for exactly the same reason as Robert is with Virgin Media in Northampton, where we've lived for 20 odd years, 30 years actually. 30, oh right.
Yeah, we moved out of London after we had our daughter because we couldn't afford a property there, so with a garden, so we came up here.
Excellent. Now, Lennox and Sue, in the Chimes of Midnight, you are playing a butler and the cook of the house. What's it like to work? At the time, you weren't married. I believe it's a more recent thing. Congratulations on your recent marriage.
We've been together for 40 years, but we just didn't quite get it together to get married.
It took me a long time to decide if I thought it was, I wasn't sure.
So after 40 years, you thought there's a good chance that you're compatible now?
We also had 2 children by the time we did Chimes of Midnight. So, I don't know why it took us so long.
Why did you decide to find each other not?
There was we originally didn't get married because the accountant a long time ago said, no, you mustn't ever get married because that's how it was then. It was better not to be married.
Tax-wise.
Then it became, I think what happened was that it suddenly became clear it would be better if we were married. So that was one reason. But there was also a reason we decided, well, we might as well, really.
You couldn't find anybody better.
But also, after having made this decision, we then talked to our accountant about something else altogether. And he just came up in conversation. He said, oh, that's nonsense. You don't need to be married at all. You know, I said, what? So
we're not looking into divorce yet.
No.
So it wasn't a matter of if you can work for a Big Finish production, you can live through anything?
No, not quite. Actually, what I do remember about doing that show was we recorded it in Bristol. That's right, isn't it, Robert? And my brother lived down there, so we had a very nice couple of days down there and a break from the children. I do recall that, and we did two. We actually did two scripts that time, so we were there for a couple of days.
Did we do?
Yeah, we did two.
Seasons of Fear was the other one you did.
Yes, yeah. And Barney, who directed it, I've since worked with him as an actor. But you knew Barney through who, Barnaby?
Through his partner, Nick Pegg, who has got Big Finish connections, as you will know, obviously.
And Dalek ones.
Yes.
Well, they are famed for playing Daleks. Yes, absolutely.
But now, where was I in my cycle then? I directed 10 pantomimes at Harrogate Theatre in the north of England, which Nick Pegg wrote. And that was how we came to know each other. And it must have been that connection that somehow I got dragged into Big Finish. I have no clear recollection why. But I did 3, 4, 5 Big Finishes, I think. But,
you did 8, actually.
Oh,
there you are. You know more than we do.
No, that's okay. No, well, yeah. Actually, some of them have been a double. You know, you did some Bernie Summerfields, and some Doctor Who,
yes. Yes. But all I would say, I mean, your comment, I know it was a joke, Dwayne, but the thing about doing Big Finish is I enjoyed every single one, and it was a really good. It was a very enjoyable thing to do, and you had a great time with the casts, and meeting different people was lovely. It was great.
Mm-hmm. Well, you met a few Doctor Who's, didn't you? You didn't just meet Paul.
Well, yeah.
Colin Baker and Peter Davison you also worked with.
And I think, didn't I do a Sylvester one as well?
Oh, you did too?
Yes. Yes.
I can't remember. Did I do any more? Or did I just do those two?
No, you did 2 more as well.
Yeah, I thought I had done another.
You do one
We're
other one.
getting very old, you know.
No, I mean, this is just like a day or two's work, isn't it, for you guys? And it's a long time ago. So no, and once again, you both worked together on. It's called The Whispering Forest, which was a Peter Davison story with Janet Fielding, Mark Strickson, and Sarah Sutton. You were both in that together.
Oh,
yes.
Where did we do that? In London?
Yeah, presumably.
I do remember the Chimes of Midnight more. I think it's probably because we went to Bristol to do it.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember those two quite specifically and working with Paul.
The one as you seem to know everything, the first one I did, which I have no memory of what it was called or anything.
The Shadow of the Scourge.
The Shadow of the Scourge. Now, I remember that most vividly of all of them because I seem to remember that I had to transform from being an alien businessman, from being a northern businessman into an alien insect in about 3 seconds, which was just fantastic.
With some of the most gross sound effects ever, as your body gets cracked into an insect-like figure, and you are rebirthed into a huge insect. Yes. Now, Robert, do you know how you came to how did you come to work with Big Finish?
I came to it sort of even more circuitously, really. A very good and old friend of mine, Mark Wright, who writes and produces Big Finish now. So we know each other from Halifax. We went to school together, grew up, blah blah blah. And Mark has always been a Doctor Who fan and just gravitated into sort of around Big Finish. So through fandom he knew Gary and then Gary was setting it up and we got introduced. And Gary, when I became a professional actor, just took pity upon me and fed me small morsels. and just and gave me a couple of roles, and which was absolutely lovely. And you see, it's interesting you saying that's just a couple of days' work, but never underestimate a couple of days' work. It's you live for those moments, you know. That it's not just the money. It's kind of it's just sort of being. It's the whole thing, and the thing about recording audios as well. There's no pressure of learning lines. And you can, so as long as your sight reading's okay, you can just give yourself over. The hardest thing is learning to turn the script without making a noise, and so there's very little pressure, and it's an awful lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, these days they try and encourage the performers to use iPads, so they don't have the rustle of the pages. But back then, they wouldn't have been so much in use.
Never even heard of an iPad, or indeed,
absolutely not. No.
Yeah, I mean, Apple were those big coloured computers around that time, I would have thought, sort of 2000, 2001, whatever it was.
So, Robert, had you worked with either Lennox or Sue before Big Finish?
No, I mean, that's. I think this is the one and only time we've worked together. I may have catered for you, because one of the things I ended up doing was doing catering for Big Finish for a while. Yeah, for me. So yeah, no, but I think this was the only time we'd worked together, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So what? I mean, what's an actual day look like for you as an actor? This was in Bristol, so you were put up in Bristol. I assume you were put in Bristol because at that stage Paul McGann had only just started work for Big Finish, and they really wanted to keep him, and they weren't sure whether he would actually do much. And so everything was being done to keep him on side, including shipping all the people
he was living in Bristol. I don't know whether he still lives in Bristol, but he was certainly living in Bristol then. So it was a convenience for him, really, for it to be recorded there. And it was rather nice for us to actually get out of London and, Northampton, in fact, and go down there for a few days. Especially as Lennox was at drama school in Bristol, so it was, going down old haunts.
So what does a Big Finish day look like? Can you remember? How would the day work?
We got to the studio at a set time, probably 10 or 9:30. And I can't remember whether we did a read through.
I can't imagine we did a read through.
I don't think there's time to do that.
No, the way I kind of remember it is you turn up. You all have coffee, you introduce yourselves, you say, you have a little chat, and then you get called variously into the booths and you just start doing it. That's it. Lunch. And I think on that first day, it got very weird because when at lunch, didn't Simon Pegg and Jessica, my names are terrible. Simon Pegg definitely turned up on one of those 2 days that we were down there doing it.
That's right. I do remember that. Now you say it, I remember it. Yes. Gosh.
Yeah, and then you work till sort of 5-6 o'clock. Then you go for a little drink. Then I don't even remember where I stayed, actually. And then you repeat the. Go home.
I've got a feeling we stayed at my brother's. I don't think we were put up somewhere. I don't recall that.
I don't either. Not at all. God.
And if we were staying overnight, one would have thought they would put us up somewhere. But anyway, I think we stayed at my brother's, which was very nice for us.
Yeah.
I mean, it should have been 4 days recording because the length of the two stories usually. It's usually a day per 60 minutes.
As I recall, it was 2.5 days, and there was almost a problem because Paul, the final half day was a Saturday, and Paul had not realised that he was actually called on the Saturday and was supposed to be going back to Liverpool for a big family gathering. So he wasn't too thrilled. I don't know whether you remember that, Robert, but I do. He wasn't too thrilled. He did, and I think they hurried it along so that he could finish by lunchtime so he could get to Liverpool for the rest of the day, as it were.
I don't remember. I do remember Paul. Paul was very quiet. He was very, very quiet during the whole. He'd just sit in a corner in the paper and occasionally drop it and offer a comment. And he was never unfriendly. He was never unprofessional. Just very, very just very, very quiet. I don't remember that at all. It rings a very.
I do. I remember he was completely thrown when he was told we were doing Saturday as well. And that was because there was a big family party of some sort up in Liverpool. And of course, the McGanns are a very kind of big Liverpool family. You know, all four boys they're all actors.
All actors, all big, yeah.
And musicians as well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he did get away and get to it, but I think he was hoping he'd be setting off either Friday night or first thing on Saturday.
So they most likely just recorded all his scenes first and then finished off the scenes without him? Is that like?
I don't think so. I don't. I think did they do them in order, Robert? Did they do the scenes in order?
Oh gosh, I think that
Not always, but I think maybe with recording they do.
I'm pretty sure they did them in order where they could. I know that they can obviously record out of order, but I'm fairly sure that wherever it was done like a play, you just kind of rolled, and then people were in and out the booth all the time.
Yeah, and that way at least you had some sort of thread of what the plot was. When I mean, it was complicated enough as it was.
I was going to say, so how on earth did we know what we were doing?
There must be other plays you've done, Lennox, where you don't actually know what you're doing, though, aren't there?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, I'm used to doing, working for 6 weeks and not knowing what I'm doing. I suppose if you're just there for a morning or a day, it doesn't matter.
As long as you're giving the director what he wants. Barnaby seemed very pleased. I remember that.
Yeah, I said to you via message, Philip, that I have virtually no memory of it at all, apart from the fact that I did get the vibe that it was regarded, even as we were doing it, as one of the better scripts they'd had, and that the feeling about it was very good. And everybody seemed very pleased about what was going on. To my embarrassment, I essayed a gentle Irish accent, which I wouldn't want to listen to again.
We must listen to it.
No, I don't want to, which I would not have done, I don't think, if I'd thought about it. But
I'm pretty sure you can listen for free on Spotify if you're interested in actually hearing the story.
Oh, I've got a copy of it.
So. Oh, there you go. Well worth listening to. In terms of the quality of the story, I mean, Gary Russell talks about the fact that when the script came in and he read it, he actually read it aloud with Nicholas Briggs and I think Barnaby, and they were just sort of, for timing reasons, they just sort of read the script out loud. And as they read it, the three of them were just going, "This is amazing. This is brilliant. This is great." And Gary begrudgingly sort of thought, "I can't direct everything of Paul McGann in the season. Okay, I'll hand this one over to Barnaby," which he still says he regrets that he handed it over, because now, as I said, it's now regarded as if anyone ever says, "What should I listen to with Big Finish?" usually the first one they say is this Chimes of Midnight. Can I say, in terms of actors, I mean, the three of you just had, the five of you in the cast, really, because there was also another Louise Rofe playing Edith and Juliette Warner playing Mary. So the five of you were the downstairs, but you all had this really strong rapport that comes out in terms of the relationship. And I guess Lennox and Sue have got an advantage of being in a relationship together already. But how is it that actors manage to pull together rapport if you haven't met before, you haven't actually spent much time? Do you know what it is that actually allows actors to get in a sound booth and relate, where when other people try and do it, it just doesn't happen?
Well, that's interesting, actually, because I think it's part of the joy of the job, actually, that this often, hopefully, you meet people, whatever it might be. It might be recording something, or it might be, starting rehearsing a play, and the thing gels. Now, it doesn't always work out that way. There can be, people in a company that won't play the game, as it were, that have a different kind of agenda, and that can spoil it. So there's a lot of luck involved in that, I think. And I think, in a way, maybe Barnaby's casting was good. I think you've got to rely on a director being able to cast well and hoping that the cast will gel together. I remember the people being very good fun to be with that day. And as you say, Robert, Paul was a little bit more distant, but that's just Paul.
Well, you also expect, well, as you just said, I mean, all actors are very different, and Paul McGann was a sort of already a leading man who quite clearly, you pick it up very quickly, was not really interested in the minutiae of anything else apart from just going into the booth and doing the words, whereas most of the rest of us would probably chat about, hello. I mean, any gathering, especially of actors, even at a read-through or in a thing like that, starts off with, how did you get here today? Well, I came on the M1. Oh, no. What you should have done was A46 and then fight thing. Then you go round there. Oh, God, no. I want to...
It's a very British thing.
So it's a very British thing. So you just start off like that, and then everybody's got the Guardian or whatever, and the crosswords start and all that sort of thing. And I found doing audio, I did quite a lot of audio at Pebble Mill when the BBC was still there, that I got to meet actors who I'd always hugely respected, who I would probably never have met before. And nearly always they were really, really nice. And it was that's such a rewarding experience when you meet somebody that you really respect and you come away without that being tarnished at all.
I also think Robert's right in saying that with audio, you don't have to learn the lines. So there's a lot of pressure off you.
Yeah.
You can relax a lot more. I think a lot more than even going to a read through for a theatre play where you know you're going to have to start performing it and there's a pressure on you even at the read through. Whereas you don't have to learn the lines. You can get in the booth and you can be directed by, Barnaby or whoever is directing it. And, Bob's your uncle, really. It's a much more relaxed environment. So that I think that helps a lot with the audio work.
On that note of sort of on with Paul, I mean, you've got to remember as well that at the time, Paul hadn't wanted to touch. This is how I heard the story. Paul hadn't wanted to touch Doctor Who at all. He'd done the big TV special. What was that, Philip? Was it the 40th anniversary special or something?
It was 1996. It was just they were planning to revive a whole series filmed in Canada, in America, or North America anyway. And so they made the movie as a pilot, and then it hadn't been picked up.
So I think he kind of maybe his fingers were burnt a little bit by it not being picked up, or whatever it was. He hadn't really wanted to touch it. So it's a massive coup for them to get.
Paul, yeah.
They were very, very accommodating, and I think why he was possibly very quiet because he wasn't sure whether he wanted to do it. It was a bit of pocket money for him, and since he obviously enjoys doing it because I don't think he's stopped doing them yet, has he?
No, he's still doing
so
them.
I mean that you must remember that as well. But okay. Well, I mean which says an awful lot, sort of 20 years down the line. Yeah. But sure. the other thing that you asked the question about how do actors how do we sort of build that rapport so quickly? I mean, apart from the bleeding obvious which just what you do, you've got to remember either through experience or through going to drama school, you spend your time not being humiliated, but forcing yourself into situations where you have to shed any kind of the usual sort of expectations and behaviours that in normal society you are thrust together with a bunch of people, and if that means you have to after 2 hours you have to go and kiss somebody or you have to get very physical with somebody, this is just what you have to do, and you can't afford to be a shrinking violet. And it's just otherwise you're just never going to work, and it's never going to feel comfortable. So we're very free of inhibitions, or hopefully very free of inhibitions, or at least they're under control, even if you're not free of them. So I mean that's and if you're working in booths, you don't even have it's absolutely fine because you're purely connecting sort of hourly anyway. You're not even having to connect physically. It's just about tuning in to what's going on. And reacting to that. I really loved work. I love doing voice work. It's you really can sort of concentrate on that minutiae of people's different tones, and you just don't. There's no other work where you get to do that. I mean, in theatre, it's much bigger. TV, I wouldn't claim to have had the experience really to mastered it, but it's very, very different.
Mm-hmm. It is, and I've done some radio work, which is similar, but there is that feeling, though. I mean, I remember the last thing I did, it was an Alan Bennett thing, and Alex Jennings was playing Alan Bennett in it, actually. And he walked up, I remember him walking in on the day, and he's great, Alex, great fun, and just saying, "Oh, do you know, I just love doing radio." And it's because there's something that happens when you're doing audio work where you're shed of anxiety. It's a much, I wouldn't say it was an easier thing to do, but there's something that's more relaxed about it. So you are, and your inhibitions are just shed away, I think.
There's one cast member that we haven't mentioned yet, and she was relatively new off the blocks at the time, and that's India Fisher. How did she come across to you, Sue?
Oh, she was great. She was lovely. I mean, I don't remember a huge amount about her. And I don't know what she's doing now. Has she gone on to great things?
Yeah, she does all sorts of voice stuff.
She's the voice of MasterChef.
So India is one of the funniest people I've ever met.
Yeah, she was great fun. I remember that.
What can I say about her? She's a good actress. I mean, that voice. I mean, there's a reason why she's been the voice of MasterChef for so long. It's a very, very distinctive sound that she's got. But I keep saying it, but don't never underestimate the power of humour. She's very warm, very funny, and she's good at what she does.
Yeah, I had the privilege of meeting India when she came to Australia. We actually flew out for a convention out here, and so I got to interview her, and she's a lot of fun and a bit crazy. But it's often hard to tell with actors because sometimes you guys just know how to put things on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just mention a few other bits and pieces. Lennox, I know for a while it was Coronation Street you were working for. Was that right?
No, I've never done Coronation Street.
I've done Coronation Street.
You were on Coronation Street. And yeah. I think Robert was Coronation Street too? Or Emmerdale?
Yeah.
Lennox was Emmerdale.
Mm.
And you did a day on EastEnders, didn't you?
On the day. The whole episode.
What is the role of the soap? Did you call them soap? What do you call them in
soap operas? Yeah,
you call them soap operas over there. What is the role of soap operas in the UK for the UK actor?
Well, if you're in them permanently, it's a big breadwinner. It's lots of money. It's not actually as good now for guest people going in. Everything has had to be. Economy has gone on big time in some of them. So the first time I did Coronation Street when I was much, much younger, playing a very young housewife as a sort of little guest appearance, it was a completely different world then. You went into the studio at Granada, the old studio at Granada, and the regular characters had little spaces, little desks and booths around the room where they could learn their lines. And then, you would go onto the set and do your bit. I mean, obviously, as a guest, I didn't have that. I must have had a dressing room somewhere, I guess. The most recent times that I did it, when I was much older, it's basically learn the lines and shoot it. There's no rehearsal, it's straight on. And a completely different world now than it used to be. I mean, it's still got a huge following, Coronation Street, but a very different world. The people who are regulars in it earn a lot of money. It used to be that even as a guest, you would do quite well out of it, and they would pay expenses and put you up in a nice hotel. The last time I went to Manchester, I had to find my own accommodation, and they gave me a small budget, which wasn't really enough to cover a hotel. So that it's not as good as it used to be. I don't know whether it's different on the other soaps, but it's a much tougher world now because they have to pay their regulars such a lot of money that the guests don't get to be paid a lot, unless maybe you're a big name. I mean, Ian McKellen went on it, didn't he? I can't imagine he did it for nothing.
I think I did three or four episodes, tiny scenes, probably about 18, 20 years ago. And exactly what Sue said. I mean, I found it quite brutal. The cast were lovely. You turn up in the green room, everybody's freaky for a start. I don't really do soaps. I've never enjoyed watching them or anything. So other people get far more excited than I got being on it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, having a job is wonderful, but the fact it's Corrie is kind of like meh. But you turn up, the cast are lovely, but it's you go to costume, you go get your makeup done, you hang around. Robert, your scene, bish bash bosh, you're done, and that is it. I mean, I've heard that obviously I'm not acting anymore, but I've heard that money has gone down and down and down. And particularly for things like adverts as well. But TV is. Unless you are one of those actors who instantly translate, it is a skill you have to learn. And the more you do, and one of the great things I think about being in a soap, if you can escape the gravitational pull of a soap and get out of your typecast, of which there are a few or more and more actors doing it, the great joy, I guess, of doing them is that you get an incredible amount of experience in front of a camera, and you get to know what works and what doesn't work. You get to have to learn scripts very, very quickly. But otherwise, if you're doing a bit part, as they used to say, a bit part, if you've got a bit part on anything, then it is quite, even back then, it's just like everyone's very lovely. You turn up, you film it, and then you spat out, and that's it.
And it's much more nerve-wracking, isn't it, than doing an audio? Because the pressure is on you to get your lines right. You're working with people who are doing this every day, and they really know their stuff, so that I feel it's more pressured.
They're not interested in your motivation. They're interested in getting everything they have to get filmed for the day done.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
So what other ways do you think that the whole profession has changed over the last 20, 30 years? I mean, you've all got lots of depth of experience. What have you seen has changed? Anything good for the better?
Well, just actually going back to link up with what was said before, I found as a mainly theatre actor that as time has gone on, there is less and less and less theatre work. There's less work of any sort. So that when I was young and you would join a theatre company, you could nearly always guarantee there were one or two people in it who were deeply unpleasant, and you would have quite a hard time having to sort out who was okay and who wasn't okay. Now you get a theatre job, you go along, and you usually have a very good time because there's so little work that everybody is so pleased to be working that they tend to think, yes, let's just do this and have a good, it's going to be great. And I find that quite a lot, actually, that the old days, that also maybe could be something to do with me getting old.
Well, if you're finding people more pleasant, that's the opposite of getting old, isn't it?
Yeah, it could be.
Also, you used to start in the theatre and you'd get a job which wasn't just one play. You'd do a season, which meant that you learned an awful lot more about your craft, actually, from older actors who were there within the company. That's a rarity now, an absolute rarity. It's all one play at a time, And I think, if I did a year at a regional rep when I started out, and I learned so much from doing that. I mean, and it's like doing an apprenticeship. It's complete joy. And also you make friends for life from that experience. The other thing that I think has changed radically, and it's been even more enforced through the COVID problem, is that now you don't get to meet people for auditions as much. Everything is done on Zoom. Or you have to do self-tapes, which we're all going nuts about. They send you a bit of script, they tell you what you should be wearing, you've got to film it at home, and I think it's become much less personal. I feel that we're much more of a commodity now than I ever used to feel. I don't know whether, I think you agree with that.
That's what everybody says now.
And we are all getting very tired of it. I mean, it was a great thing to go and meet to an audition and meet somebody and prepare something. Now you're sort of doing something in the front bedroom and hoping you've got the background right and the light right. It's awful.
I've now become an accomplished director of Sue's self-tapes. But as she says, we send them off into the ether, and you never hear anything back half the
time. It's disgraceful.
Rude, apart from.
I mean, I don't mind if they say yes or no, but to get nothing is appalling, and the commercials are the worst for that.
I mean, I think Equity are onto it, but Equity,
Yeah, they're trying to get things changed. I mean, you're supposed to be given 4 days to do it. Half the time they're asking you to do it by tomorrow, and send it in. So that's something that has changed really, really radically, actually, and particularly during the pandemic, it's become more exacerbated.
I mean, I'm full of admiration for anybody who stays in it, because, of course, I've been out of it since sort of 2006. And one of the things that I just found, it defeated me for various different reasons, was the fact that you might have worked a couple of times that year, and then you get a call from somebody, you go into an audition, they haven't got a clue, and they're not interested in who you are at all. There's just, and you're starting from, so you're having to explain from absolute scratch, what you've done, trying to sell yourself again, particularly with TV. And I guess that's the nature of the business. If you don't like it, tough, and do what I've done, which is to leave. But I mean, I've got friends who are still in it, and they're still working. They're generating their own work. That's always a good thing to do. But I hear about all of this now. When I left, it was very much an analog industry. You sent in physical photographs still. We hadn't even got to the stage where you emailed a photograph in, because that wasn't quite there. Certainly, you didn't record. You actually, it was always, there was some kind of physical audition. You'd turn up, you'd do the hands, do your profile, whatever. All it's changed out of all recognition now. From what I've heard.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe it'll get back to being similar within the theatre, but there's less work in the theatre. I mean, I think the theatre has really, really been hit hard by the pandemic. I think you will meet up with people again for auditions for that. But as far as telly and commercials are concerned, it's all self-taping now, which I don't hate doing the self-tapes, but I hate the fact that it's all, you're in a bubble, you don't know what's going on, who you're doing it for, and what the outcome will be. And half the time you never do find out.
How as actors do you deal with rejection? Because I mean, that's a huge part of, you keep putting yourselves out all the time for the next role, the next job. And, I guess most of the time you're going to actually be rejected. How do you actually deal? I mean, let's see, you've both had a huge long careers in acting. Have you dealt with a lifetime of people saying, no, you're not right?
It's not a problem. Just get used to it.
You get used to it. I think, I mean, it's very hard when you start out. I mean, it's really painful. And it can still be painful as you get older. If it's a part you're particularly interested in, you still feel, oh, that's a real shame, but you get hardened to it. Otherwise, you'd never stay in the profession. Because I think you've got to be able to sustain that. You've got to be able to take the blows in order to keep going.
I recommend crying and drinking. They're two great ways to deal with it.
Yes.
It's exhausting. I mean, it can be exhausting. You guys I don't know how many years, 40 years to say you've been actors. Is that correct?
Yes. But not been doing very much of late though, Robert, I can tell you.
No, well, but I mean, there were times when literally you can't afford the bus fare, or you can't afford a can of pop. You don't know where the rent's going to come from. All of these things they add up, and they can be absolutely exhausting. And it's no surprise that I think the industry has moved yet again towards people of independent wealth, because it's just, if you've got no pressure of money, then you've got no pressure. You can afford to just wait for that audition, or to do a class, do this, do that. You don't have to be finding a job. As ever with, because of course I work in food now, and the other great the other great mistake people make is thinking that being a chef is glamorous in the same way that they think being an actor is glamorous. It only gets to be glamorous when you are being invited to the event. And I suspect even if you're being invited to the events and photographed on the red carpet, all the different pressures. So it's the way the media sell it. It's just it's a way for them to sell papers or to to get people to watch the news bulletins. It's not a glamorous lifestyle, particularly when you're lower down the ladder. It's hard.
Yes, it is hard. I feel incredibly sorry for the young actors who are coming out of drama school now. And there's far too many of them going in, really. You know, the drama schools are making money out of people who can afford to go, who will probably never work, which is terrible.
I worked at Mount View Theatre School, taught, I directed plays for them for 7 years. And one of the reasons I stopped was that I just thought, this is ridiculous. All these kids coming in and going through this, paying all this money to go through this drama school, and they are not going to work, and I could count on the fingers of 2 hands over 7 years the people who actually I ever saw again. 1 or 2 have made it, which is great, but very, 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 very few.
And the postgraduate course that
was
all about who could afford it.
Awful drama schools. Let's take thousands of pounds from weird Mexicans and tell them that we're teaching them acting.
We had a couple of conversations recently. We talked to Bonnie Langford recently, and she was talking about the fact that people assume that there's all this money that she must be getting because she appears on telly and she goes, there's all of the news programs and things. She's just saying, there's so much of what she does that doesn't get paid for at all, but people assume that they see you. But she does all these appearances, but that's all unpaid. All about just making sure you got enough image out there to hopefully get paid next. Yes. And then we're talking to someone else who appeared on a couple of episodes of Doctor Who, and people just assumed he'd earned so much money that he could start paying their mortgage for them. So he's just saying that the perception that the public have is that if you appear on TV once or you're in something, then you must now be loaded. Which of course, isn't the case.
It's absolutely not true.
Robert, you did about 15 different stories for Big Finish over your time. You did. You did a whole unit series. You did Sarah Jane Smith shows. You did The Adventure of Luther Arkwright. You worked with Colin Baker, Peter Davis on a number of occasions. You came back for another Paul McGann. You worked with Bonnie Langford and Sylvester McCoy in The Fires of Vulcan.
Oh my God, yeah, I did. Forgot about that. I tried to find Chimes of Midnight because I've got a physical copy. I don't know where it is, and I actually looked for it online and I couldn't find it. So I'm going to give it a listen to. I did 15. Gary was nice to me, wasn't he? That's news to me. I didn't realise that because I haven't seen my physical copies for so long. I didn't realise I'd done that many.
There's 16, I think it is.
6. Wow. Oh, I'm quite impressed by that. I mean, look. Oh yes. So I did Unit, which was Will. I did a few of those. They're great fun. They're just great fun. And yeah, Chimes of Midnight definitely is one of the best scripts that, regardless that I've ever worked on. It's just a really clever, interesting, very tight little story. But they're great fun to do, and the universe is kind of endless with Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, I'd encourage you guys to go have a listen because we listened again, and I mean I've probably heard it 20-30 times and re-listened again in preparation to talk to you guys and some other stuff we're doing, and it just in terms of the quality of the script that's there, but also it looks at class structure really well, even the downstairs class structure, because the whole thing about the chauffeur and the scullery maid and a scullery, there's no way that could possibly ever happen, and and even the whole thing with the cook. And I mean, one of the main catchphrases that you hear Doctor Who fans quoting all the time is "Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without Mrs. Badley's plum pudding," which is something that's repeated. It's said about 30 or 40 times during the course of the play. Because one of the things that Robert Shearman does is he keeps using catchphrases over and over again, like a children's storybook, to make the characters become more and more terrifying as things go on. And Lennox, you don't become a giant evil bug in this one, but you do get taken over by an evil house.
Yes.
So you actually has to portray all sorts of alien evilness along the course of the production.
It's very easy to mock when you've got fandom like this, but I don't think it should ever be underestimated. I remember meeting Mark Wright. Gosh, this must be even pre-2000. I remember meeting him in a pub in Soho. There was lots of people, lots of Doctor Who fans used to meet there every so often. I can't remember the group, and I remember meeting there, and this was 2005 was when it was relaunched, Doctor Who. When did Gary launch? Was it 1999? Gary launched Big Finish. Is that correct? Yep. So in this pub, there were a whole bunch of people who went on to write. All of their names I can't remember. Steve Moffat was there long before he got his hands on Doctor Who, but he was already. I think he was already writing for TV by then. Obviously, there was Gary, and I remember sitting in a room at somebody's house in Bath with Gary and him talking about what starting Big Finish. So it's being kept alive by people who creatively and sort of organizationally are very, very energetic and very committed, and it's a very sort of strange but gratifying sort of universe to get involved in. I mean, my daughter loves Doctor Who, absolutely loves it, and she's not heard any of the stuff that I've been in with Big Finish because I can't find them. I don't know where they are. So I'm going to look for...
You must.
What is also interesting is that both Sue and I have been in plays actually together when you do you give your all for your art during the course of the evening, and then in the bar afterwards, there's two guys stood there with a huge cardboard cutout of something to do with Doctor Who that you were once involved in. Said, "Could you sign this, please?"
I was really surprised.
But I've just been head of Gardner. What did you think of that? Oh, I didn't see that. Will you just sign this, please?
There's lots of people who turn up at stage doors.
Well, I was at the National not long ago, playing absolutely nothing. I remember coming out afterwards and being mobbed by Doctor Who fans. And Mark Strong, who was playing the lead, a lovely, lovely guy, came out and sort of stood next to me and said, "What's going on, Lennox?" I said, "Oh, sorry, just carry on, Mark. I'm busy.
I'm busy doing autographs." But really, the Whoies are extraordinary because they'll come all over, they'll travel just to get signatures from Len and I, who were basically just in an audio version of this, you know, which amazed me. I remember a couple of guys came down to, where was I working at? That little theatre.
Was it the Mill at Sonning?
The Mill at Sonning. Yeah. And they'd come down from London just because I was in this play and they knew that I'd been in the Big Finish products. And they wanted me out, and then they said they were so disappointed because they'd been to the National the night before to try and get somebody's autograph, and the play wasn't on. They got the wrong night, and they were so disappointed. But I just was astonished. They didn't come to see the play. They just came all the way down to Sonning just to get my autograph.
Keep in mind that Big Finish have done thousands of productions. And Chimes of Midnight is regularly regarded as the best out of all these thousands of productions. So you shouldn't be too surprised that people are coming.
Well, no, perhaps not. But I was. I was surprised at how far they travelled for it.
And then you have these two crazy Australians hunting you down, wanting you to come on.
I've got this message from some bloke in Australia. What's this?
He said, "Should I reply?" I said, "Yeah, you should reply."
My mate Mark tells this story about he was one of those beautiful serendipitous moments. He was walking past, I think, was it the National? I think it was the National. Tom Baker did something a good few years ago at the National, and as he came out the stage door, he had a couple of Doctor Who fans waiting there with their scarves on and their hats and everything, and they simply, I think they offered up. They just sort of said, would you mind? He went, "Oh, go and bother a proper actor," and then off he walked. and that was.
Well, I seem to remember every time I did a big finish, there was always part of the chat was whether or not they were getting any further in getting Tom Baker to appear. And I presume they never did.
No, they've got him. They've had him for the last 10 years.
Oh,
and
sorry, right. Well,
and he's recorded enough material for the next 7 or 8 years.
Oh.
So they are putting things in the can in the preparation from not being here anymore, and they're getting further and further ahead. So even after he's just celebrated 10-year anniversary, and they've got years and years to come yet for after he's gone.
That's true.
Yes, okay, we are a bit crazy. I mean, sorry, there's something about Doctor Who fans that we try and pretend we're trying to pretend we're quite normal here, can I just point out. So thanks for pointing out all our foibles. We really appreciate that so much. Listen, can I just say thank you so much for your time. Can I say, listen, I mean, I was hoping to get, if you've got a few remembrances from your 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to be happy. Can I just say, I've had the best time. So thank you so much.
Okay.
I mean, yes, and thank you for your careers long. I know COVID's been particularly hard for actors. I think one of the things we appreciate about Big Finish is the fact that, I mean, I'm sure they don't pay extraordinary amounts, but the fact that they've actually kept ticking over throughout all of COVID, and the writers, the actors, the directors, it's a huge production that they continue to do, and it's great that the fans are supporting them, and as a business venture they're able to keep going and keep being creative. But it's really down to actors such as yourselves who come in, do something for a couple of days, and still get remembered years later. So
that's extraordinary.
It's very much a craft you're creating which lives on long after you.
Yes, I mean,
we appreciate.
Nobody remembers my performance in Harrogate in 1970-something as Inspector Slack in Murder at the Vicarage, but Chimes of Midnight, hey, it's great.
I was still in nappies. Lennox, you say the slight Irish accent. You sound very much like Adrian Dunbar to me.
Oh, well,
that's flattering.
I could have sworn, I looked at the cast list a while back. I thought, this is Adrian Dunbar, and I got a big shock.
If only you'd had his career, Lennox.
Yes, I know.
Thank you so much, Lennox, Sue, and Robert, for taking the time to chat with Philip and I on the 20th anniversary of the release of the Chimes of Midnight. We really appreciate it. Now we'll get back to our earlier discussion that we were having with Todd from Flight Through Entirety. It's very interesting. It has some parallels to Punchline, which was the BBV release written by Rob under the name Jeremy Ledbetter, which is one of the characters from The Good Life. He wrote under that pseudonym. Have you ever heard Punchline, Todd?
No.
It's in terms of dialogue, it's very, very similar to this. It has a similar effect on me. So if you get a chance to ever hear that, Punchline by Jeremy Ledbetter or Rob Shearman, definitely one to seek out. We were talking about Barnaby Edwards, and I still see his name and I get a little bit excited. He seems to put a lot of theatrics into all of his direction. So you can tell a definite difference in direction if you've been listening to Big Finish for a long time when it comes to Barnaby Edwards. And so for a long time, he was probably one of my favourite directors. Of course, Gary Russell directed most of those early ones, with Nick Briggs doing a few as well. But Barnaby was the other one. So, went on to do The Pirates, didn't he?
Yep, that's Barnaby.
Brilliant.
Yep. So that was Barnaby and Nick Pegg putting that together with early Helen Goldwyn. I mean, Helen Goldwyn was in a lot of the Eighth Doctor stories as well. So she was there all the way from the beginning, but not in Chimes of Midnight, of course. What other gems have you got for us, Philip?
Well, I was thinking big themes. It is one of those things that actually thematically is very powerful in terms of looking at the social classes, looking at how we view ourselves. Todd's recollections of Rob Shearman are spot on in terms of how he presented himself. But it is interesting, he did also talk, and I think Todd will probably remember, over a beer or two later on. Actually, I think he drank wine. He talked about just being a writer and how hard being a writer can be, and lonely and depressing, and you never think you're good enough, and the struggles. And I think a lot of his sometimes negativity comes out of the story, and some of the bleakness that's there, I think, is coming out from Rob. And one of the things he does so powerfully is just use the same repetitive phrases over and over again, which is what a children's book does. A children's book, repeats a phrase over and over again, which both gives you warmth and security, but the way he does it becomes more and more slightly macabre and also unsettling. And so, I'm nobody, I'm nothing, which becomes a major theme. And he plans stuff in plain sight. So, when Edith is the first one to die, and she, is drowned in the washing up water, and then they come in and say, "Oh, she committed suicide," and they're saying, "Well, it can't be suicide. You can't drown yourself in a tub of water." Oh, well, she's a silly girl. She probably didn't know that. And just the way they talk down all the time, but there's this constant humor, which is bleak and black about death, and then he takes that and rolls with it in terms of understanding who we are as people. And so I think that's yeah. As I said, this is an amazing piece of work. It's so well constructed, and it just the macabreness of what he does to the characters, and then of course at the Chimes of Midnight, everything resets, and that's the whole point of the title. Chimes of Midnight, everything resets. Chimes of Midnight, everything resets. But then of course, eventually the house works out that on the Chimes of Midnight, he's got to work out how to live forever, but at the cost of what's the cost that's going to be to the Doctor and Charley.
Yeah. Another aspect I should mention is the sound design that was done by Russell Stone. He's done many of the classics over the years, and he still does occasional episodes these days.
I thought Andy Hardwick did the sound design and Russell Stone did the music.
You're probably right. Let me just double check. Yeah, Andy Hardwick, Russell Stone. Right. So let's talk about the music, because that's a big thing that I want to compare with the most recent release. So the music in this is very minimal. It's got those little sort of upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey type tropes that go throughout the music, but then you've got these sort of booming sort of vibes that keep pulsating in and out throughout the whole episode. And I think that makes this era really unique, particularly when you compare 20 years ago Big Finish to now. I think I kind of miss that simplicity of those days a little bit when it comes to sound design. It's always good to go back and revisit, of course, but it's a stark difference to me. I don't know what you think listening to the more recent episodes, Philip, what you think, how the music and sound design compares.
Well, the music was interesting because the ticking clock, that clock you can hear in every scene, and it depends which room you're in, how loud it is. But of course, that ticking clock is a metronome going. And then so the music actually fits the metronome. So all the music written is either 60 or 120. So a piece of music is, when if you're a musician and you're given a piece of music, it'll often have the tempo on the top of the page. And if it's 60, that means 60 beats per minute. So that's 1 beat per second. Or if it's 120, that means 2 beats per minute. And so the composer has actually written every bit of music at either 60 or 120, so that it fits the ticking of the clock. Otherwise, the whole thing would jar. And so just the fact that he's gone to this effort of actually composing everything to fit. But yeah, I think that's beautiful piano. I mean, every character has a little leaf motif, which is a German word, just meaning a little theme. And so, Edith has her little piano theme. That's a da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. And each character has a slightly different theme depending on who they are and their importance to the whole house. Because it's funny, because, we talk about upstairs, downstairs, and usually our focus is on the rich and those who are upstairs. But downstairs has a bigger class system. And so, being the scullery maid was the lowest of the low, whereas being the lady's maid, almost as good as the housekeeper. There isn't a housekeeper in this. But, you've got the butler, who's the highest, you've got the cook, then you've got the lady's maid, who are sort of equal, but they fight with each other as to who's more important. The chauffeur, and then the scullery maid, and just even who you could date, who you could see, who you could spend time with. Rob is really attacking class structure at every level in this work. And then he uses the music to do the same sort of thing.
Todd, how important is that to you, or are you just listening to the story?
I think if a soundscape helps me to visualize or what's going on and doesn't interfere with the story, like in terms of the dialogue, and I can follow the story, then it's doing its job. It's not too intrusive. So you know, if you've got, you know, huge sounds going off here, there, and everywhere, and the use of a vocoder over voices, that sort of stuff annoys me. So I tend to appreciate it much more when it's subtle, or when you've got themes going through, or there's a moment of silence and there's just like, you know, one instrument or something like that. So yeah, it's got to not distract me from the story and immerse me in it. And I think that's what it does here with the Chimes of Midnight. I certainly think, listening to the rest of the newer box set, they're certainly using a lot more sound effects and whiz-bang sort of elements that you know you can get now over the internet quite easily, you know, as compared to back then. And I think sometimes that works really well. I mean, I think the Eclipse story with I don't know if I can talk about this, like what's in that with the moths, I thought was just tremendous, and I loved all of the sounds in that.
Yeah, there's certainly quite a comparison between the two, or a stark comparison, shall we say. We'll definitely talk about that in a second. Now, a lot of people listen to the Chimes of Midnight at Christmas because of the Christmas themes throughout the story. They always listen. I see tweets and things like that. People say, I'm listening to the Chimes of Midnight, and some podcasts review it at Christmas time. Is it a Christmas story, Todd?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Philip?
It really hasn't got Christmas themes in terms of new baby coming to life and new birth, because it's dealing with death and suicide and bad choices.
Yeah, that would be my thought on that. I don't think it's about Christmas at all. So
yeah, Merry Christmas.
To say that's
people call Die Hard a Christmas film, but I'm not convinced Die Hard counts either. Yeah, they didn't choose to release it at Christmas time. Yeah, I mean, it's got Christmas imagery, and it's got all the plum pudding, and Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without plum pudding. So there is all that mentioned. It is Christmas Eve. But I think that's partly just to add to the depressiveness of it all, because here you've got Christmas Eve, you've got a house full of people apparently partying upstairs, and then you've still got the nobodies, the nothings, forced to be downstairs serving the rich and the mighty.
But Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without her plum pudding, isn't that the line or something like that? Yeah,
yes, over and over again. It's funny because in this they had to actually change the script because Robert Shearman had Edith being told to take the plum pudding out of the oven, and of course you don't cook plum puddings in ovens, you steam them, and so they had to rewrite the lines, because even though there's all this stuff about plum puddings, Robert Shearman apparently knows nothing about how to actually make a plum pudding.
He's a writer, not a cook.
Exactly.
Very good. Any final words, Philip, on the Chimes of Midnight?
Yeah, I think it's okay.
It's all right. Passes.
Yeah, I mean, it is with good reason that this is, one of the most revered of all Big Finish releases. It still holds up in time, and it's 20 years old. So happy birthday!
Any additions to that, Todd, or ditto?
No, I sort of agree. It's not my favourite of his writing, but I think it's very good, and it does still hold up.
Excellent. Well, that's the 20th anniversary of the Chimes of Midnight. Let's have a little talk about The Further Adventurous, the Charley and Eighth Doctor box set that was just released last month, which we've all had a chance to listen to. I'll throw in a trailer right here.
The only place in the world where one can relax entirely, you said. A spirit all of its own, you said. Like a wine, it has a bouquet, you said.
I did.
Well, it's got a bouquet, all right. Doctor, it absolutely honks.
It's Paris, Charlie. City of lights, city of life, city of love. Come to think of it, it does smell a bit.
From Big Finish Productions.
Oh, Lord, we seem to have roused the mob.
Indeed, Miss Pollard. When I say career...
Don't worry, I'll career like a lapper.
Career!
Doctor Who, Charlotte Pollard, The Further Adventuress.
What are they? Giant moths? Oh, I hate moths. Hate moths!
What's that?
That is my sonic screwdriver.
Selka! What did you do to my daughter?
Oh, Doctor!
No!
Oh, it's taking off! Doctor!
Stop firing!
It's gone.
Yes, and it's taken Charlie with it.
I've never seen them do anything like that before.
These are the coordinates for the Garazone system.
Garazone? When we went there, you nearly
Died, yes, I know.
What's happening?
The doctor's doing something clever.
Like what?
Not entirely sure.
Wait a minute! Are you saying that my daughter was being controlled by a signal?
There's nothing we can do. They brought this on themselves. You can't just go tearing up an ecosystem and not expect consequences.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
I need help. And you're the only other person I can think of who has a motive for getting back up there to Amston's airship.
True, and I tell you something else.
What's that?
You are going to be extremely grateful you teamed up with me.
Righto, Philip, give us a rundown on these 4 stories.
Okay, so Big Finish decided to do a box set of Charlie Pollard, which is wonderful because these box set companion ones have all been brilliant. The one they did with Perry and the Sixth Doctor was just amazing stories, and also Lucy Miller and the Eighth Doctor. So I think this is probably the 3rd set they've done with bringing back a companion with her Doctor. The Mummy Speaks by Alan Barnes. Alan Barnes is, of course, the creator of Charlotte Pollard. He wrote Storm Warning, and he did a lot of her pivotal moments throughout her life, as the character's life. And it really is just a traditional Charlie and Doctor story. It would fit perfectly into season 2, or in that gap between season 1 and season 2. You wouldn't know anything different about it. It's a fun romp. Then Eclipse by Lisa McMullen, which takes on some more modern themes, but still some good ideas in there. Eddie Robson. This is one that I really enjoyed. Eddie Robson seems to have a thing about cars because he's done a few Big Finish stories involving cars, racing, etc. And this is The Slaying of the Writhing Mass, which is a timey-wimey story with the Doctor and Charlie trying to get to an event, which all these time ships are going to. So it's pretty funny. And then Heart of Orion is Nicholas Briggs doing a sequel to his Sword of Orion, which he did in the very first season of Paul McGann. But it wasn't what I expected, because I kind of expected there'd be Cybermen. But it's actually just, I did. I don't know why I expected that, but it was a sequel to Sword of Orion. Did you expect? Well, I did. I expected it to be Cybermen. And of course, the whole sequel is actually just looking at the world that Nicholas had created. And it works brilliantly. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. It just wasn't what I expected. So that's a rundown of the 4 stories.
Actually, the Writhing Mass story, there was a character called Constella in there, played by... And I could not stand that character. I was probably not supposed to stand that character. But her name was Shiloh Coke, which I thought was interesting because that's my daughter's middle name. So that stood out to me. Never heard anyone else with that name before. The thing that stood out to me was the writers on all 4 stories. Of course, Alan Barnes and Nick Briggs bookmarking the set. You've got 2 guys who were there right at the beginning of the 8th Doctor and Charlie. Lisa McMullen, she is one of the regular newbies who is there. So she's writing lots and lots of new stuff for every range across the board, doing a great job. And I can't decide. I can't decide on what my favourite is of the set so far. Eddie Robson was there in the middle. So he was writing for the 8th Doctor and Lucy Miller. I think that's where he started writing for them, unless he wrote... Yeah, that was.
Yep.
Were you still collecting Big Finish by the time the 8th Doctor and Lucy Miller came out, Todd, or had you sort of slowed off by then?
I'd slowed off. In fact, I've never heard one.
Oh, really?
I only know the 8th Doctor and Charlie.
Right.
And Keris.
Okay.
So coming back to this, it was just so interesting to hear both of them together after 20 years. And I just felt that India just slipped so effortlessly back into the role. Like Charlie was there throughout the whole things. It was just as it was. For me, what was interesting about Paul is that I actually felt that, over this time, his voice has mellowed and deepened slightly, and his delivery has slowed slightly, which is something I always had a problem with in the early stuff, where I felt he was too frantic and too fast. Whereas here, it's just, I don't know, it's just slightly slower, and it was really worked, and I really enjoyed his performance. I'm perhaps not as enraptured with all the stories as you guys appear to be. I did not. I really liked The Mummy Speaks, although the gorilla element was a bit of a problem for me. But then again, I felt that was taken from New Who, where the Doctor speaks to horses and babies, and then you've got I Can Speak Gorilla.
It was very Matt Smith, wasn't it? The gorilla.
Yeah, it was there. That's fine, and I really did appreciate his own shout out to the Chimes of Midnight in the dialogue. And the City of Death, which I always love it when they name check other shows in the dialogue. But it was very easy to visualize. And as I said, the eclipse with the moths, I have a phobia of moths, and that whole thing and what was going on. I love all that sort of stuff in the forest. The slaying of the riding mess, I just lost interest. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just after the little person came to try and sell them refreshments or whatever it was, or souvenirs, after that, as it went along, I just went, I've got to get to the next one, but that's something about those stories that deal with time paradoxes that I really detest in any Doctor Who, unless it's done really well, and I just didn't think it was. And the Orion one, again, I didn't put the 2 and 2 together, that it was from the Sword of Orion, like until the character turned up, and so I kind of wished I had re-listened to that one before I listened to the last one. But I thought it was interesting. I thought what they did and where they went with that, with the character in that of Diva. I liked it. Yeah.
So for me, I enjoyed the set. I love the fact that they split it into 2 and put 2 episodes in each one. I love that element. I love hearing the 8th Doctor theme cut in and out. It's fantastic. Took me right back. What happens, because Big Finish has been going for so long now, they're able to sort of go back and re-examine their own history now, whereas before they were just reinventing the classic series. Now they're going back and reinventing themselves to a degree. So yes, Todd, you're right. India and Paul jumped back into their roles. India was just fantastic all the way through. But it was the sound design that stood out to me as vastly, vastly different to what was before. So this is not just going back and revisiting those characters, but they're adding more modern elements of what Big Finish does today on top of it, particularly with the music and Joe Kramer. So he's do you know much about Joe Kramer, Todd? No? He's a Hollywood musician. So he does music for movies like, what's the big one he did? Jack Reacher. So he does those kind of action films. So all the way through this, I was getting lots and lots of orchestral music that made it seem more Hollywood-like, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's sort of, to me, I'm not sure that it needed it, even though, as I say, there was nothing wrong with it, but it took away a little bit from the nostalgia of the past, even though it was fine. What did you feel about the music, Philip? You don't listen to music so much, do you? You're more of a stories man.
No, I will analyse the music often as well. I don't listen to the opening titles and closing titles every time because I've got to get through them to get onto the story. Joe Kramer, I really love his stuff all the time. I think he's a very clever composer who tends to write, epic music, which I think, it works well. Yeah, music and sound design were probably the 2 areas that show this is a different box set to the original.
It does give it that different feel, and certainly having the 2-episode format as well. And I know at least one of them had like a pre-credit sequence, which I kind of went, oh, you're doing what modern Doctor Who does. And, so I kind of appreciated that too.
Yeah. No, but overall, I think this is a good anniversary box set. Ken Bentley behind the wheel. Like Ken Bentley was nowhere to be seen back in those days with the 8th Doctor and Charley. He came on long after they finished. I think he was around on the scene when Charlie started going off with the 6th Doctor. So there's something if you haven't heard those, Todd. If you haven't heard any of those.
No, I have.
You have?
I pick and choose.
So yeah, Ken Bentley was another different element. They had 4 different sound designers as well. So Joe Kramer was one of them. Is that right, Philip? You're looking at the
that's right. Yep, Toby, Steve Foxton, Joe Kramer, and Naomi Clark. So they
doesn't say which. I think Joe Kramer worked on the last one. I don't know which one Toby Robinson worked on. That was probably the Mummy Speaks, being sort of that historical setting. But obviously we know Toby Robinson owns the studio, and so he's been around for a very long time as well. And so is Steve Foxton. But I haven't heard Naomi Clark before.
No. And of course, this is the new producer, Emma Haig, too, who's just recently joined in the last 12 months, Big Finish, and starting to produce a lot of new stuff. And she's, young and go-getter, which is great.
The next generation's coming along.
They are.
All the oldies are sort of priming up all these young'uns to come and take over when they retire.
Mm.
It's very interesting to see and see the direction they're going. Very good. All right, thanks, guys, for your recollections on the Chimes of Midnight. It's been great to talk to you, and it's been great to talk to you, Todd. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you both for having me here. It's been great to reminisce and certainly see you both again after quite a time. And yeah, it's great that you're still enjoying Doctor Who in this medium, which I think is a great medium, and Big Finish do such a wonderful job at.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much, Philip.
It's my pleasure.
All right. We'll catch you all next time. This has been the Sirens of Audio episode 95, the Chimes of Midnight 20th Anniversary Special, with our guests Lennox Greaves, Sue Wallace, Robert Curbishley and Todd Beilby, with your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by the Jackpot Golden Boys. Contact details, links to our podcast and video locations, social media and more can be found at sirensofaudio.com. Keep listening to quality audio drama. After all, Big Finish has been making it for decades, and it's not just for the love of stories. It's because audio drama